Hi, everybody. So we're gonna keep the party going. My name is Brittany Martinez, and as our wonderful panelists take a seat and get cozy here, just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping items. So number one, unfortunately in our society, many of us are chronically online, myself included, and maybe some of the folks in this room. So what I want you to do is follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter. Yes, we're still on X. We got to be where the people are. Make sure you're following each other and helping us support principled messaging. Next, just a quick background on me is that I have worked in politics and government exclusively, and so I'm quite cynical when it comes to this sort of thing, and I imagine lots of you who are well-informed about what's happening on the news are a little bit like myself, and yet, when I look into this audience, I can't help but feel a groundswell of optimism. Because like you, I believe that America's brightest days are ahead of us despite some of the terrible obstacles directly in front of us. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our panel, which is way more interesting than me. So our next panel is a Politics of Principle, Building a Governing Majority, featuring former Congressman Joe Walsh, Norm Eisen of State Democracy Defenders Fund, Nick Troiano of Unite America, and Unite America is our principal champion sponsor for today's event, so thank you so much, and Julia Spiegel of Governors Action Alliance. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. What a testament to one of the themes that we're going to discuss today on our panel, the politics of principle, building a governing majority. We're going to talk about how that governing majority is stirring across the United States. And in this wonderful, huge room with all of you here, I was talking to Heath. He's like, well, we've got to lift the limit again. We've got to sell more tickets. The demand is so great. You've already been introduced to my distinguished panelists today, and we're going to jump right in on the question of the state of the vibrant Big Tent Alliance, how it did. We're going to ask ourselves three questions. How did we fare in the just concluded election cycle for this cross-partisan? It's kind of represented by this panel in many ways, this cross-partisan alliance. Can you only look at the top of the ticket, or if you look down ballot and you look across our culture, how is the pro-democracy group of allies? How did we fare? Where are we today as we sit here and people are getting ready to go yell at members of Congress across our country in anger because of the chaos? Yelling is allowed on the panel and from the audience, only in a loving. If I yell, it will only be in a loving way. Where are we today? And of course, the most important question of all, a two-parter, where do we go and how do we get there to reclaim our democracy for the grand cross-partisan team that has steered us since 1776? How do we bring that back? So I'm going to start by going across the panel, and I'm going to limit you. We have a little clock here. If you see me looking at my watch, it is not because I want to be elsewhere. It's discipline, what I'm not famous for, discipline. Going to do a 60-second speed round. What happened to the governing majority in this just concluded 2024 election cycle? Don't confine yourselves only to the top of the ticket. Congressman Joe Walsh, co-founder of the Freedom Caucus, board member of Democracy Defenders, where I ply my trade. Joe?
Norm, great, thanks. Everybody can hear me? Yes. By the way, thank you all for coming out today. Thank you all for coming out from all over this great country to be here. God bless you. Give yourselves a round of applause. I'll be brief. I want to hear these two. Look, we lost 2.5 months ago, almost 3 months ago. We've been down. We've been despondent. We're angry. Many of us wanted to check out. This is a rough time. There's a tyrant in the White House. The very person our founding fathers feared is there. If you don't get down and upset about that, nothing will upset you. But Norm, here's my note, and this has hit me in the last month. What an amazingly cool opportunity we all have. Because there's a tyrant in the White House, because he's everything our founding fathers feared, we have an opportunity to fight him. We have an opportunity to try to defend this democracy. Most generations of Americans don't have this opportunity we have. It's going to be ugly. Enormous damage is going to be done in the next 2 to 4 years, but this is our chance, Norm, I think. Norm Eisen and I, 6-7 years ago, were on CNN on opposite sides yelling at each other. Now I love him.
With love.
There is a bipartisan, cross-partisan, something rising up against what MAGA is. This is an opportunity. I'm excited.
Wow, I want a dose of whatever it is that these
Same.
two guys drink in the morning. I clearly missed out on the pregame, but next time I'll join in.
Tailgate. There was a wild tailgate in the parking lot.
This is how you save democracy, folks. So I come at this, I think we will be going towards the solution, unless you want us to reach that now, but a little bit on the diagnosis of where we are
And
now.
do the down ballot as well, because the full electoral story is not told. You represent governors. You work with governors. What about down the ballot, Julia? Assess that too in 2024.
So the perspective that I'd offer, so I do work with governors across the country to protect fundamental freedoms. So I'm not electoral. I work on the inside helping governors to govern. But what I'd argue from that vantage point that happened in this last cycle was that talking abstractly about authoritarianism or abstractly about principles of democracy didn't meet people where they were in their daily lives. That what was happening was when you talk abstractly about the price of a carton of eggs, that didn't hit home in the same way that the day-to-day stuff of life does. So for instance, a fellow mom of mine, mom friend back home, who has 3 kids and her husband was out of town. She just didn't have time to make dinner. She was exhausted. She went to McDonald's. She got 3 Happy Meals and a 6-piece chicken McNuggets for herself. Can anyone guess how much that cost? And I'm not gonna tell you what state I'm from. $55. $55. And that made the election make more sense to me than any other data point up until that moment. That just trying to make ends meet in the most basic way when your mom, and she only got 6-piece chicken McNuggets. She didn't even get a full meal. But I think the point is that when those things of daily life feel hard, being hit with being told that other things should matter more, or that these high-minded principles are what you should vote for, not the stuff that you feel matters so you have food on the table for your kids, or so that you can make sure your kids are going to school and able to get meals at school. That is what really lands, and I think there was a challenge of translating that, and that's where governors are really effective, and where I think you see they have much higher approval ratings than other electeds, generally speaking. They're where the rubber hits the road for most people in terms of meeting those needs of their daily lives, making sure the roads don't have potholes everywhere and that the schools are functioning and so on. So what I would argue is that where electeds are able to really connect with people on the stuff of their lives that matter, that you do see real results. But Norm, I see skepticism on your face.
Wait. And before you get to Norm and before we get to Nick, let me just say, as a former elected, I agree with everything that was just said. The price of eggs, the price of chicken McNuggets, all of that shit matters. But as a former elected and a former candidate, and we're talking about the Democrats and the opposition party, you also have to make democracy matter to the average person out there. And I do believe the average man and woman in America who's struggling every day affording stuff also cares about the state of our democracy. You got to make the case for both.
You have to connect the two.
So I think that is exactly it. So we did a poll, for instance, that looked at how do you feel about the state of democracy? Unsurprising, I think, to everyone in this room is that people didn't feel great about it and felt that there were real threats underway. And when we tried to unpack, well, what does that mean? And this was across partisan landscapes, independents, right, left, you name it. And the answers were economic matters. The answers were opportunity, cost of living, healthcare. That was their concern about democracy. So I think the argument, the connection, is that when governance doesn't work, when institutions aren't working, they can't deliver these things for people, and we need to make sure that they do work. That is democracy at its best.
Demonstrate democracy delivers, dictatorship doesn't. Nick, as the head.
Yeah, but, Norm.
Let Nick
No,
talk.
and then we're going to Nick. He's got the rest of the half hour,
It's great
I
to have a
promise you.
front row seat to this panel.
Democracy will deliver, authoritarianism won't, but also make the case democracy is right, authoritarianism is evil. Go, Nick.
All right,
Okay.
Nick, as the head of Unite America, you look at this election. We're closing out now on our first question. You look at this election, in my view, a close election, about 240,000 votes in 3 states. If they had flipped, that means 120,000 people had just flipped their vote in 3 states. Someone different would be in the White House. Put aside the down ballot successes, narrowing the House, people like Tammy Baldwin, Alyssa Slotkin, Jackie Rosen, who were successful in their states. Nick, how do you anatomize what happened?
Well, I think this last election is a warning sign for the strategy for the pro-democracy movement to largely hitch its wagon to one political party. And what I mean by that is when you look at that one political party, the Democrats, they suffered both a branding problem and a credibility problem. The branding problem came because they're out of step with the mainstream voter in our country, and that's largely driven by the role that primaries play. When you look at who had the top of the ticket and go back to the last primary season, she's out there endorsing Medicare for all, anti-fracking, decriminalizing border crossings, whatever you think of those policies, that's not where the mainstream voter is, and that's the branding problem. The credibility problem is being out there saying this party supports democracy when that same party was shielding a president who was manifestly unfit to serve a second term, when, again, they shut down the debates for their own primary and even canceled primary elections, when they tried to get their only opposition candidate off the ballot of a novel legal theory, when they were trying to strip ballot access from third-party candidates, including one that is now the Secretary of HHS, and when they're out there opposing nonpartisan election reform. So when that party doesn't have credibility on the issue that they're saying is existential for the country, that's what happens in the last election.
And yet, and yet that exceedingly, at least in my analysis, that exceedingly close margin, despite the factors you identify. And Nick is a longtime independent, as you can tell. Not just capital I, all the letters are capital in independent for Nick. Let's do another pass across the panel to talk about today. Where are we right now in terms of the reaction? Donald Trump said he would be a dictator on day one. The thing we know about dictators is they very seldom relinquish power on day two after they've grasped it on day one. And in fact, that essence of dictatorship that our founders in overturning King George III, that you have a governance by a man, not a government of laws. That essence is seen in the daily assault on the rule of law that we have. Where are we in terms of the reaction to that and reviving a new, or the governing majority that turned Trump out in 2020 that was so successful in some of those down ballot races, couldn't quite get there at the top of the ticket in 2024 today? What's your assessment? And Nick, I'll give you, we'll go at the end and then come across the panel this time.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're at today is that our constitutional framework is being challenged in a very pernicious way, which is this series of checks and balances that we're supposed to have. As others have written about, instead of having a separation of powers, we're seeing that we more so have a separation of parties. It's become a team sport across the branches of government. That's not how the system was designed. We see that in the confirmation hearings that are playing out. I think Pete Hegseth's a good example of this, getting confirmed despite issues that sunk a nominee for Secretary of Defense facing the same thing just a couple decades ago. But that's largely because that check is undermined by this weaponization of our primary system in our country. We saw this in Joni Ernst, was early to speak out, but the saber rattling began in our home state about, oh, maybe we'll primary you. Or Trump flying with the congressional delegation from North Carolina, asking them, which of you are going to challenge Tillis, who's up for election? That undermines our constitutional order and why we're seeing Congress capitulate to the presidency. That's something that we need to address at a systemic level, and that's going to be a bit of medium to long-term work as we talk a bit about these election reforms. But we need to have a true governing majority for democracy, and the problem right now is we have two political parties that represent minorities in our country. Neither candidate got over 50%, in this last election. By show of hands, who here is unaffiliated with either political party? Last year, that number rose to 51% in Gallup. The challenge is we don't have an electoral system that can truly represent the people, and that's what we need to address.
And we'll talk about Nick's solutions when we do the third round of questions, and then we'll come to all of you. Get your questions ready. Julia, what about from the governor's perspective? You work with them and their most senior staff every day. Do they, some of our more successful governors, where they have 50 and sometimes popularities even in the 60%, do they represent that governing majority, even if they're affiliated with one party or another?
I'd argue they do, and that they have strong bipartisan support and independent support in their states writ large, and it's because they're there to serve their people. I think where you really struggle is when there's a credibility gap in terms of thinking that the person in power is actually working for the will of the people. And in the states, you do have that. I do think, though, Norm, you were pressing us to diagnose this moment. Where are we now? I think we're in a moment of incredible fear and incredible resilience. The fear side, I would argue, for governors and others, is that they don't want people in their states to be harmed. That when you're at risk of losing all federal funding, when Medicaid may get shut down, even in a state like California, with the 5th largest economy in the world, you lose Medicaid funding, the state goes bankrupt. So the fear, the cudgel that is being wielded, hanging over the heads of governors, is really significant. And yet, you are seeing them stand their ground. I know there was a back and forth last night, it seems, between the president, or dictator-in-chief, as you would say, and Governor Mills.
I call him Fafotis, the first felon of the United States. Fafotis. And I don't call him 47. I call him 34 for those 34 convictions. Fafotis 34. He's hate watching.
I'm actually just here to set him up to say these things.
Julia is one of my best friends. I'm fortunate, actually, I picked a panel with dear friends. Go ahead, Julia.
All that to say, so I did catch a little bit of Governor Hutchinson before we came on the stage, and I know he's concerned. He expressed some concern about the nature of the pushback that Governor Mills provided based on the issue about transgender athletes and women playing against women. What I'd argue is that Governor Mills was standing up for the Constitution. Woo! She was saying you cannot say you will take away all of our federal...
Preach!
Now you think I paid him to be on the panel. I don't know what's going on. But Governor Mills, my point is, she was standing up for the Constitution. She was standing up for federalism. She was standing up for her place in the constitutional system. And that is what we need to see more of and to stand behind and not be divisive.
Amen. Woo! Look, completely agree, and agreed with everything Nick said. Our politics sucks. Both parties suck. I wish I lived in a country with 5 vibrant political parties. Our political system is broken. Yada, 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 yada. I agree with all of that. I get all of that. I come from the Tea Party. When I ran for Congress, I ran against both parties. But know both sides to what's going on now. And I appreciate Nick's perspective, both parties, all that. No. This is not an equal both sides threat to this fucking country going on right now. Stop that. Donald Trump's magic is to get normalized. when we normalize him and say, oh, Joe, they're all bad, Biden's too old, they all lie, they're all a threat to democracy, when we go down that road, he wins and we lose. We've never had this before. And by the way, and Norm said, so where are we now and what do we do? If you don't believe in your bones what I just said, that we've never had this unique threat, that yeah, both parties suck, and yeah, Joe Biden was 180 years old, but this is unique and different. If you don't believe that, then respectfully, go on your merry way. But if you believe that, and this is where I want to kick the Democratic Party in the ass, act upon it. Norm, where is my opposition party? Where is my party getting pissed off every day at what this guy is doing? I need an opposition party, Norm. Where are they?
Well, three things.
But where's the...
First of all, I'm definitely not walking in front of Joe when we leave the stage in case he can't control himself. That's point one. It's like a democracy revival meeting except for the F word. Other than that, it was like it's the weekend.
And I apologize.
You do not have to apologize.
I
for your
apologize
passion.
for the F.
He's on my board. Can you imagine what our board meetings are like? And that really brings me to if you look at the front page of the Washington Post today and what I'll say about the moment we're in now. If you look at the front page, and we've been covering this heavily all week long, really for weeks on the contrarian, as some of you know, I quit CNN. Jen Rubin quit the Post because we wanted to call it like it was. We didn't want to be held back. And that's now 500,000 people all over the country. In 4 weeks, 500,000 people in our contrarian movement. We've been covering all week that the sleeping giant is awakening, that Trump's numbers are going underwater. Elon Musk is even worse, truly hated. The chaos is hurting the people. They're firing the people who are supposed to control bird flu and monitor our nuclear weapons and prevent fires in our national forests. Egg prices are soaring and airplanes are crashing down. That's the opposite of what people elected Donald Trump to do. So people are mad about it, and it's not just liberals who are mad about it. You're seeing in these town halls, it's on the front page of the Post, spontaneous demonstrations around the country. The sleeping giant is awakening. And I'm going to say, as I set up our last round, where we go from here, that this ballroom and this conference and Heath having to constantly raise the threshold of how many people we can get in and can you take down another wall? We almost had to get Elon Musk's wrecking ball that he's using on the federal government to knock down some walls here at the JW Marriott. That you're seeing that energy arising. So I'm going to go one more time across the panel. This time I'll start with Julia, not you, my friend. I'll start in the middle.
Go ahead, Julia.
I'll start in the middle. I want to go once more across the panel. America is at a crossroads. We are facing an internal danger, the likes of which we have never seen in our history. A dictator for day one who's kept at it, who's violating the rule of law. State Democracy Defenders Fund, our philosophy is when he floods the zone, we do rule of law, shock and awe. And we and our wonderful allies, including center, left, and conservatives and libertarians on the right, we have a board that's distributed across the spectrum. For every one illegal action Donald Trump does, we do 2 lawsuits. And you're seeing those lawsuits are winning, and it's waking America up. And when you subscribe to the Contrarian, since it's a nonprofit, all the excess goes to support the litigation. So I want to go across the panel. We're at a crossroads at a country. Will we go the way of Poland, of Brazil, Czech Republic, where I was ambassador, the Tel Aviv protests where autocratic actions or leaders were ousted in recent years, democracy restored? Or will we go the way of Hungary, Turkey, or Russia, where the efforts to restore democracy failed? We're at that crossroads. Nobody knows how it's going to go. Julia, starting with you, what do you think the future holds for us? How do we get there? And I'm going to limit everybody 60 to 90 seconds because I want to take questions. Julia?
So I will just offer, on a personal note, I am the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. This is my worst nightmare, to wake up in this country and realize overnight our Constitution is being ripped to shreds. And what I think we need, to your point about opposition, is for all electeds to stand up for the people and the Constitution, not party. And we're not seeing that. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that, particularly in Congress. Everyone on the right, technically the right, the MAGA right, whatever it is, however you want to call it, they're in lockstep with Trump right now and with Elon Musk. And until we see more fissures, until we see more pressure and people speaking out for all electeds to stand up for the people and the Constitution, I think we're going to be in trouble. Now, I will say governors are a key part of that solution. Whatever your party, federalism has been a core part of this country from its founding. States have rights in this equation. States cannot just get pummeled by an authoritarian or by a dictator or by Elon Musk. They can't, and they won't. And so I do think much of our power also lies in the courts and in Norm's litigation and all the caffeine he drinks. And it lies in our governors and the states who also have authorities and powers to stand in the breach where we can't expect every person to be able to do the same and make those same sacrifices. And they're doing that every day. And I would just say sometimes it's loud and proud and sometimes it's quiet, but it's all opposition. It's all defending the Constitution.
Nick?
Well, first I would say, to your point earlier, Joe, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to reject any false equivalency. I'm on board with that. What that doesn't require, though, is for us to suspend our independent judgment to call balls and strikes for democracy. Otherwise, we become a version of what we're trying to fight. The second thing I will say in terms of the path forward is, right now, there are 3 senators who have stood up in these early votes. One is Mitch McConnell, who's retiring. Retirement's a good political reform, I think, in some cases. Second, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. It is no coincidence. They come from states that have enacted significant election reform. And I do think that is the path out. We have to liberate our leaders to truly represent their constituents. Charlie Munger, once said, "Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome." With the incentive structure we have, we're living the outcomes. The good news is that there is nothing so broken about our democracy right now that we don't have the tools to fix it. And that is what gives me hope at the state level across the country. There are people working on these reforms that will make our Congress more functional, that will enable us to uphold our Constitution. And that's what we need in this moment.
And
Well said, Nick.
Nick has been a champion of reforms like ranked choice voting that have enabled us to have a more diverse group of candidates that more truly represent this vibrant center of our body politic. Joe?
I am not at all as sunny as my friend Norm. I'm a dark Irishman. I'm a former Republican member of Congress. Forget about Republicans in Congress. They're done. Every time I go on TV, and I think it began a day after Trump was sworn in, I've said we're in a constitutional crisis from the get-go. Why have I said that repeatedly? Because we all know, we all remember as kids, right? Our founders gave us 3 independent branches of government. We have 2 right now. I mean, we can laugh about that. We have 2 right now. Think about that. We have 2 independent branches of government. The legislative branch, the People's House, the branch our founders imagined to be the most powerful, is gone. They have pledged their fealty to the guy in the White House, no longer the Constitution. I mean that. The courts, as Norm knows better than anybody, we're going to win most of those battles. The courts are overwhelmed. That's going to take some time. Outside of us, the people, Norm, rising up, because it is our government, it is our country, it is our democracy, again, I go back to this. We need an opposition party. We're living in a populist moment. Amen, amen, amen. We're living in a populist moment. Nick's right. We are just dying for change and reform. People are pissed off. Democrats have never recognized this populist moment. They sound like elite snobs. I campaigned every day for Kamala Harris in one battleground state after another, and I heard from thousands and thousands and thousands of voters, Norm, the same exact thing. Damn near every voter said to me, Joe, I know Trump's an asshole, but the Democrats look down on me. The Democrats don't care about me. I heard that over and over and over. So America chose the asshole who they thought cared about them. I need Democrats out there ripping off their clothes and fighting and talking to regular people like regular people speak. We need an opposition party right now.
Well, I did not wear a necktie. I don't know if I'll rip off my clothes, but in an effort to be a populist, I did ditch my necktie. Joe, a very important part, and then we're going to take questions. I think this is what Julia wants to say, too. A very important part.
Oh!
A very important, hold on. A very important part of the place where we're finding that populist and popular leadership is in the states. And I'm going to let Julia close us out to talk about how governors, Joe, it's not just two branches. There's the fourth branch, the states. That's another part of the structure. Julia, talk to us about how governors are exemplifying what Joe wants.
So I will sort of do that, Norm. So what I wanted to tell was an anecdote, which is states had historically, we had been working in our states in sort of silos, not working across state lines. And then we realized we're confronting similar challenges. The threat to the Constitution is not state by state. It doesn't abide by state borders. It affects everyone. And so governors and governors' offices have started working together and coordinating to tackle these problems because there's power in numbers and there's safety in numbers. And so that's what we're doing. But I want to share a quick anecdote, which is that when fundamental freedoms started to be stripped away, when chainsaws are being taken to the government, I got a phone call from another governor's office. And she said, I can't believe this moment has come. We were all afraid of it. And here it is. And we thought the cavalry was coming. And then we realized the cavalry was us. So we all in this room are the cavalry. And I just want to say that we're relying on everyone here to do that work of fighting for the Constitution.
Your horses are waiting. All right, we're going to take one question, because we're very tight on time.
Oh, my God, what a tease he is.
Who is going to get a microphone to somebody?
I want another hour and a half.
All right, sir, you're like me. Yes, you're like me in elementary school. Me. Speak loud.
Okay, hi. Okay, yeah, you can't win.
Short question, please. Don't follow his example.
Well, my question is to him, because he says we need an opposition party. Why not call a founding convention of a conservative party and run candidates in every district in 2026? And we say to the Republicans, you are not conservatives, and if you think we're splitting the vote, you get out of the race.
Wow, what passion. He doesn't need a microphone. There you have it, friends. The first president and vice presidential candidate of the new Conservative Party. We love you. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you.
Yes. It's doable, and that may be ultimately where we go. That is a tool in our tool chest. We just need maybe $100 billion, but we can do it. And we can get it, and we can get there. So that's one thing we got to do.
It's like improv theater.
Amen.
Bye, guys. Thank
you, everybody.